Good day, and welcome to another one of Ransford's weekly wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, what we'll do is we'll cover a few stories from the week that affect you and your investments going forward, as well as a little AI wrap at the end. So, starting off, we'll talk about China. We've talked about it in the past, so I'm not going to be too in-depth about it. Inflation, so inflation numbers have come out and how they affect you. And finally, I'm going to do a little deeper dive into a little strange topic today, which is going to be what's happening in Africa at the moment. And then in our AI segment, we'll talk about Tesla and as well as some stuff out of Google/Alphabet as well. So starting off with China, just a little wrap up. I'm pretty pessimistic on China. The last couple, these podcasts I've done have gone quite in depth into why I think China is in a bit of a bad situation. Just a little update on that. This week we had some more stimulus from the Chinese government, which what's about to point out what the stimulus looked like and why I think it's indicative of the kind of problems in China at the moment, as well as a little kind of a factory number release that came out that was not great as well. So first, let's look at the factory number that came out, factory PMI, production manager index, and I think purchase manager index, the PMI number that came out, and that was a bit lower than expected, below 50. This shows an economy that is not growing great. We are looking at a situation right now where the Chinese economy, which at one point in time was doing 8, 9, sometimes even like 13% in a year, is going to have trouble over the next, I think, decade or so, averaging above 3%. Quite frankly, it's going to be quite difficult for that economy to grow anywhere near the levels of growing in the past. In fact, to grow at significant levels at all. Interesting fact, the percentage, China as a percentage of US GDP has actually started to shrink a little bit. I remember people were talking about, just forecasting 5-6% growth rates, a couple of decades in the future, and showing how China was going to be, significantly bigger than the US by 2050. Right now, that kind of forecast is not looking that great. And also, we'll talk about some of the remedies the Chinese government is trying to put in place. One of the things they did was cut stamp duty on share trades. Stamp duty is basically a cost of doing transactions. Cutting it makes it easier to trade. That could give you a temporary boost to the price of shares. That's true. But this doesn't do anything to solve the real problems in the economy. The problem in the Chinese economy is not the fact that they don't have enough speculation. There's plenty of speculation in the Chinese economy. In fact, in the property sector, there's probably too much speculation happening there. Rather, the situation in China, it requires fundamental changes to a couple of things. There needs to be obviously something done about the demographics, which, is a longer term issue. Maybe immigration, maybe something to do with the increasing the, positivity of the population, that they have more children. There has to be some serious structural changes. There need to be, moves to free the population up, because we have seen things, for instance, like what's happening with the tech companies that are, the bastion of the Chinese, or at least the shining light of the Chinese, miracle of the last couple of decades. Things like Tencent, Baidu, and so on. These companies, Alibaba, these companies at one point in time, were running quite strong, but have been pulled back because of government interference. It doesn't make sense to be a tech entrepreneur in China, or to be, if you're a very talented person, be a tech person at all in China, if whatever you build can be destroyed by the whims of the government. So yeah, China is still quite negative on. Moving on, we had some inflation numbers coming out as well this week. Let's look at local and some international ones as well. Local inflation, South Africa, we had the PMI number coming out. Was not looking, too bad, better than last time. We also had international PC number for the US come out. That's the consumer index. It's like it's another measure of inflation that the Fed thinks is rather important. Again, saying a slight bottoming, starting to move up again. So it's not as low as the last number. It's like a slight increase, but it's like still significantly lower than recent peaks. And why I'm bringing this up is a couple of things. The South African number being as low as it is, the first time it's been this level for quite some time. The problem is that next week we're going to have petrol prices increase by over a rand. Diesel price increases, I think, even going to be higher than that. And why is that important? It's because inflation is rearing its head again. We haven't gone down to the level that we wanted to have as a target, yet inflation still remains incredibly high. So what we are doing at the moment is we are seeing the possibility that inflation is going to be increasing before we hit the targets we were hitting before, and it's going to be quite difficult for central banks out there to be actually looking to cut inflation, cut interest rates while they're still dealing with inflation that's not just higher than what they were targeting, but also increasing. And I think that's an important factor to be noting. Many of the assumptions about the stock market for the next year or so include the possibility that inflation interest rates are going to be coming down. And I still personally think they are going to be coming down. But I just want to point out the fact that we are starting to see signs that the downward momentum in terms of inflation is ending. And if that is the case, it's going to be a case where the central bankers are kind of going to be going against their mandate to start cutting interest rates, especially when we are still seeing inflation above the target range, or the target level at least, and possibly still rising. Cutting interest rates into a rising inflation that's above what you want it to be, it does show weakness among central banks. Not to say central banks can't be weak, but it does show that it is something to be looking at. And finally, I want to talk about Africa. I don't talk about Africa much in this particular podcast, but I think the last few weeks are interesting. There's a couple of things happening here, especially in terms of coups that make this an appropriate time to talk about it. So in recent weeks, there's been a couple of coups in Africa, one in Niger and one in just more recently in Gabon. Now, let's start with Gabon. It's a smaller country. Gabon basically is one of the richest countries in Africa. I think their per capita GDP is like $17,000, $18,000 per person. But that's an average. Remember, an average basically is you take a couple billionaires and a couple thousand people with nothing, and the averages look nice. And that's pretty much the situation in Gabon. The Bongo dynasty, basically, which has been ruling that country since the mid-1960s. We're talking about something that's been around for like almost 60 years now. The original person is gone. His descendants are managing it. Talking about cousins and children, etc., of ministers of the country, were taken out in a coup. There was a recent election, widely seen to be corrupt, not fair, and that's resulted in a military coup. The interesting thing to point out here is the relationship between Gabon and France, and also the relationship between Niger and France as well, because Niger was the country a few weeks ago that had a similar kind of thing where they had a coup where the military did take over the government. Now, these coups, to a large extent, are being treated negatively internationally. In fact, we have seen the possibility of Nigeria intervening in Niger. So it's going to be a situation where Nigerians are going to be versus Nigerians. If I get the pronunciation right, the difference between is an A. Nigeria has an A in it, the Nigerian, or Nigeria has an A in it, and the Nigerian has an E in the same place. But Nigeria is a far more powerful country. It's a far more developed military, and if there is a war, in all likelihood there'll be a walkover. But the interesting thing to point out is the relationship with France. France has strong relationships in Niger as well as Gabon. France, for those that don't know, maintains a far stronger hold on its colonial power, former colonies than, for instance, the UK does. We still have France military intervening in parts of Africa, Mali recently, a few years ago. But the UK has pretty much, wiped its hands clean of all its, or most of its colonial holdings. To illustrate the kind of power, France has, or France wants to hold in Africa. Recently, the BRICS had a summit in South Africa, and they admitted a bunch of new members. One of the countries that wanted to be admitted was Algeria, but France put pressure on India to block that. Yeah, so France has still quite strong links to its African colonies, and like I said, when we have the BRICS meeting coming through, what we are seeing is pressure by France on India because of the fact that I think France supplies quite a bit of military equipment to India to kind of veto the acceptance of Algeria to BRICS. France also in Niger. One of the things the Nigerian military coup leaders did was they evicted the French minister, or asked him to leave the country within like 48 hours or something. The French said no. And the thought out there is that the French are actually looking to use that as an excuse to actually take down or to basically use military force in that coup. Because if the Nigerian coup leaders basically do something that endangers or even, God forbid, harms the French ambassador, the French will take that as a, kind of a go-to engage their military in that area. And I think that we are seeing right now the tensions happening around France in Central and West and to some extent North Africa, I think are going to be quite substantial going forward. These countries are not doing well. The countries that have this relationship with France, they do not seem to be doing well as some of the former English colonies, in the region. France has, like I said, had a much harder hand in that area. And I do think that, if we do see multiple, military actions happening in the area, it could have a significant destabilizing effect in Africa. I mean, if the Nigerians do take on Niger, it's not going to be just be Nigeria versus Niger. There's going to be a number of other countries on either side that's going to be drawn into this conflict. Niger was not the first one that had a military coup recently, and some of the other coup leaders might feel that they're going to be threatened if the Nigerians win very easily. On the Nigerian side, there's a number of countries out there that are not happy with the fact that coups are occurring. And even though Nigeria would be by far the largest, player in this particular thing, they would be definitely, the head of a alliance of different countries. So we could almost see a West African war happening, where multiple countries are versing multiple countries, which is not good for the region and for Africa as a whole. Okay. Now, looking at our tech segment, I'm going to cover a couple of things here. Firstly, an update on Gemini, which I talked about last week, which is Google's new AI platform that's coming through. Gemini is said to be maybe as much as 5 times larger than, or more powerful than GPT-4, which is the current state-of-the-art model, which would obviously be something to be expected. I mean, GPT-4 was trained in September 2021. We are currently in September 2023. It's 2 years later. If nothing else had changed, but the fact that there's more money available, GPT-4 was trained by maybe a couple $100 million, maybe $100 million. There's more money available. It should be more powerful because that the equipment that is available has increased in terms of power. So there should be more powerful because that. And also there has been an update, even though some of it's quite, secretive and behind the scenes, in terms of some of the algorithms being used to train these programs. And I think all these factors together should make us expect not only would the thing from Gemini, which is from Google, be more powerful than GPT-4, but we would expect it to be multiples more powerful than GPT-4. Now, why I want to bring this up is the difference between a human being and a chimpanzee is roughly 3 times in terms of brain size. 3 times. We are looking at GPT-4 to Gemini being as much as maybe 5 times in terms of difference. So if you think of GPT-4 as being the chimp, we could be seeing something that comes from Google, Gemini, that would not just be chimp to human, would be something beyond human to a chimp. 5 times is way more than 3, by the way. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, we expect that to be released somewhere this year, likely in December this year, if all goes to plan. And yeah, like I said, expect a significant improvement over GPT-4, which came out basically about 6 months ago. So you can imagine GPT-4 6 months ago, even though it was training 2021, the release was like 6 months ago. Within 9 months, something 5 times more powerful being released, which is way beyond what any kind of Moore's law ratio looks like. The next thing I want to discuss with you guys is the latest from Tesla. Now, what you must understand is that we have a lot of symbolic, AI out there. Symbolic AI is AI that works with symbols. It is, text and pictures and music and that kind of stuff. What we don't have is much in terms of AI that can deal in the physical world. And one of the issues behind it is that, remember how AI works. You take a whole bunch of data and you feed it into the mechanism and the machine and the computer with its algorithms, and what you get out is this huge matrix of numbers that basically can deal with input that it dealt with before. Like you put a whole bunch of words in there and a whole bunch of pictures and that kind of stuff, and then you ask it this program outwards that produced on this training data some questions, and it can answer those questions, okay, because it trained on the data that it will give it. Now, the data that they used for GPT-4 was pretty much all the data in the world, almost, that was available publicly, and some of it maybe not even available publicly. So we're talking about huge amounts of data, trillions and trillions and trillions of actual sentences and stuff, and on a vocabulary that's probably numbering in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even more, of words. I mean, this thing can speak multiple languages, so I would assume maybe even beyond that, maybe even millions of different words there. Now, I want to compare that to a human being. Now, a human being, a child, probably trains on maybe 20,000 words, because that's probably what the average, vocabulary out there is for the parents. And over a period of about, say, 2 years, learns to speak. Maybe 3 years, let us say maximum 3 years. Now, most people don't speak more than 10,000 words a day. So this child has had maybe 20,000 words in a day, in terms of training data, over a period of about, say, 1,000 days. So we're talking about 20 million words that it's heard in its entire lifetime, and yet it's able to come out and pretty much understand the English language and do a lot of stuff that GPT-4 does. GPT-4, on the other hand, remember I said, has taken trillions of that. It's taken many millions of times more word than it takes for a child to learn to speak, to basically do what it does. Now, why is this important? It's because when it comes to the physical world, with physical AI, one of the big bottlenecks is data. The child has this 20 million words maximum and can speak. The child also has one body and about a couple of years of experience and is able to move around and understand the world. If you take that same analogy over the fact that it takes trillions of words versus say 20 million words for an AI to do the same stuff a child does, it's going to take thousands of years for the AI to get enough data via a robotic body to do the stuff the child can do in a say 2 or 3 year period. So either you have the AI do it over many decades or centuries or whatever, get the same amount of data, or you have many more bodies for a few years. Now, there's only one company in the world that has many robotic bodies that's collecting data at the moment, and that's Tesla. Tesla's entire fleet effectively is a bunch of data collecting robots. They're collecting data about the physical world at all times, and in terms of what's been happening right now with Tesla has just come out and announced that it's going to be implementing or starting to train on a $250 million supercomputer that it's basically bought, using its AI, using its data. So that is something I think that we need to be looking at as a possible huge win for Tesla if it's able to actually make this work. Okay, that's it for this week. I look forward to speaking to you again, guys, next week. Cheers.